Welcome back. This is Two-Way Tonight. I'm Mark Halperin reporting from wherever I am. Thank you for joining. Tonight's episode will be centered primarily around Donald Trump's meandering / wide-ranging news conference, which garnered extensive cable news coverage, including on MSNBC and CNN, which could not look away and has produced a bounty of clips for us to share with you. We'll break all that down. The memorial service in the Capitol for President Carter is either concluded or just about concluded. Speakers included the Speaker of the House, the Senate leader, and the Vice President of the United States. Let's play number 8. And as we play the Vice President, I say with no disrespect meant to either her or President Carter, please count the cliches.
Throughout his life and career, Jimmy Carter retained a fundamental decency and humility. James Earl Carter Jr. loved. He lived. He served the people. And he left the world better than he found it. And in the end, Jimmy Carter's work and those works speak louder than any tribute. May his life be a lesson for the ages and a beacon for the. God bless President Jimmy Carter, and may God bless the United States of America.
All right, then. Let's bring in Hogan Gidley, John Podortz. John is a former White House speechwriter. Amazing. John, how many cliches did you count there?
Well, fewer than the entire speech, which I watched. So, left the world better than he found it. He loved America. It was very much a sort of building blocks.
Yeah.
Eulogy by somebody who didn't really have much to say about Carter of interest. I mean, she was in her early teens, I guess, when he was president. So, as I was. So I'm not sure that, I would have anything more profound to say in eulogy. I would have many more negative things to say in eulogizing him, but it was a very building blocks moment. I mean, I assume that the president who will speak on Thursday at the actual funeral will try to do something more eloquent in tribute to his predecessor.
All right, John, thank you for joining. Happy New Year. Hogan, thank you for joining. Happy New Year. Hogan and I were on TV earlier today. He was not wearing that necktie that I recall. I'm like finding what doesn't match. Hogan, Happy New Year to you. Were you able to watch President Trump's press conference today?
And you weren't wearing that pink roll neck sweater. So we've all changed clothes since the morning time. Yes, I watched a lot of it. Not a lot of it. I watched about half of it. I was actually working, but came in and caught some of it. The top line being, of course, the Gulf of America. Which, if I'm being honest, does have a very nice ring to it.
It does. And I thought it was a compromise to not call it the Gulf of the United States, because Mexico is part of North America, so they don't have to give the whole thing.
Yeah, I thought so too. It was quick to be pointed out in the office, because I'm doing some work for the Speaker of the House, who, of course, is from Louisiana, that entire land used to be called Louisiana. So technically it should be called the Gulf of Louisiana, but we'll let it go.
Naming things after America has a problematic history. Like here in New York, 6th Avenue was renamed Avenue of the Americas, and nobody calls it Avenue of the Americas. And I think we can rename it Gulf of America all if we want, but people will still refer to it as the Gulf of Mexico, just as we will not refer to the Triborough Bridge as the RFK Bridge, or here in New York, the 59th Street Bridge as the Ed Koch Bridge. You just can't force people to do that. It's the brain doesn't really work that way. But why not? What the hell?
It would be a huge shot in the arm for the map industry and the globe industry, because everything would have to be redone. Gentlemen, couldn't be happier to have you here. We're going to play a bunch of clips from the Trump press conference. I wouldn't say there was like major news made, But there are a lot of headlines that are getting attention, and certainly a lot of things that are kind of indicative of the rhetoric and policy direction of the incoming administration. So sit back and enjoy the clips with us. After, we'd be delighted to get your input. We're going to talk a little bit about the media and the questions that we're asking. I know John has a strong opinion about that, and Hogan always has a strong opinion about the media. So we'll do some media conversation as well related to the press conference. And again, we'd love to get your questions. If you're here on the two-way platform, please raise your hand. We'd love to get some new people in. I see some new people here who've never raised their hand. So please make tonight the night, your first time, long time, raise your hand. If you're watching on YouTube, welcome in. Thank you for being part of Two-Way. We're about peace, love, and understanding, and about the presumption of grace towards all. So if you're inclined to write in the chat, write as if you're attaching your name to it and standing in front of both your parents and saying what you have on your mind, in order to remember that we are not a normal platform when it comes to conversation. We're open, robust, challenging. Feel free to speak your mind, but no negative personal attacks on people. That's just not the way we do things here at Two-Way. So guys, I'm just going to roll some clips here. We've got a ton that are so interesting, and the order, we could go in any order. I think, to me, the most interesting thing going on now is Greenland, because although the government there in Denmark says it's not for sale and they don't want to be part of the United States in any way, there's a huge NATO presence there. There's a huge American base there. And Donald Trump seems very serious about this. So we want to talk about that, but let's go ahead and play clip number 5, please.
National security purposes. I've been told that for a long time, long before I even ran. I mean, people have been talking about it for a long time. People really don't even know if Denmark has. They do. They should give it up because we need it for national security. That's for the free world. I'm talking about protecting the free world. You look at, you don't even need binoculars. You look outside, you have China ships all over the place. You have Russian ships all over the place. We're not letting that happen. We're not letting it happen. And if Denmark wants to have any right, title, or interest, the people are going to probably vote for independence or to come into the United States. But if they did do that, then I would tariff Denmark at a very high level.
You ask your staff to draw plans for.
All right. So Hogan, first, you're in touch not just with Trump world, but with Capitol Hill for a variety of reasons. Is this idea being taken seriously by Republicans in Congress?
I think so, in large part because Trump isn't the first president to have talked about it. Now, while he did send his son there today, I think there's some video emerging of Donald Trump Jr. there. Trump has been very clear. Look, he's someone who deals in acquiring land. He likes the strategic advantage it gives us militarily. He touched on that as well. And again, it just always kind of fascinates me that everything Donald Trump does is some unprecedented thing. I think we bought the Virgin Islands from the Danes in like 1917 or something like that. Land acquisition is kind of part of this country's history. So seriously enough to understand that Donald Trump in this second term is not just paying it lip service. He's looking at it, and whether it ends up happening or not, or whether there's some kind of alliance we make with them remains to be seen. But yeah, he's looking at it for sure.
John, this is the thing I don't get. Hogan kind of touched on it, which is, do we really need to own Greenland? Can't we just say we want more military presence there? Isn't that the main thing? Or is it more about the minerals and therefore we need to own it?
Can I get meta here?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So not to really engage with the issue of whether or not we need Greenland. Clearly, we don't need Greenland. Sorry to say, though, I am I really
look at a map. Look at a map, John. The strategic imperative.
You don't even need binoculars.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Here's what I'm going to say. I'm going about it.
Yeah.
Trump lifts his pinky, and the entire world shakes.
Yeah.
What he is doing is he is displaying his capacity that he showed during the campaign, during his presidency, during his post-presidency, to run everybody ragged. So we have 6 hours we're talking about Greenland. You haven't even gotten to Panama, and reseizing the canal, and there's all kinds of other stuff.
How about the 51st state of Canada?
And the 51st state of Canada. What I mean
So you
is
think this
that
is all you think this is all bullshit to what end?
it is a sign that he can control the conversation at will by getting a little outlandish, by using very inflammatory rhetoric, and by getting very earnest, middle of the road, mainstream people in the media to lose their cookies.
John, I got to
the
interrupt
very
you because
sound of
I'm
his
telling
voice.
you, there are serious people who think the Greenland thing is serious.
I'm not saying that it's not serious. It may be serious.
You're saying the important thing to understand is that when he moves his pinky, everybody jumps.
What he's doing is displaying his ability to control the national conversation at any moment, at any point, at any way that he wants to. And Maggie Haberman and the Peter Baker in the 10 million subscriber strong New York Times, and their sort of live blogging of the speech, start saying he sounds crazy, he's hysterical, he's making unfounded claims about Denmark. Experts say we don't need this or that or the other thing. They are playing on his turf. They are not prepared for the kind of marathon that he is about to start the press on again. And I think that is what I take away from it, is that he is better at this.
Yeah.
But he is better at this than he was.
But John, he's the former president. He's the president-elect. He's about to be president in 2 weeks. Yeah. You can't say they should ignore this, right?
No, I think that there are levels of the things that you pay attention to. If he says, I want Greenland, we're going to take Greenland, Denmark should give us Greenland, you can go, okay, yeah, let's talk about the hostages. Because what the news, even though it's not new, is how firmly he said, sending Steve Witkoff to the Middle East, those hostages better be out,
right?
Or there is hell is going to be unleashed.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to get to that.
That's the news, right?
We're going to get. Well, I agree with you that that's the news. Although, as you point out, that's not new. And the first 3 letters of news
the Greenland thing isn't new either.
Neither Greenland,
Here's the thing on the Greenland thing that I think is new. Please play number 6.
National security purposes. I've been told that for a long time, long before.
This is number 5, I think, right?
People have been talking about it for a long time. You have a problem. People really don't even
Guys,
know.
I think this is number 5.
If Denmark has any legal right.
He also talks about Panama here.
Okay.
National security, that's for the free world. I'm talking about protecting the free world. You don't even need binoculars. You look outside, you have China ships.
You're right, Mark. It's
you
fine.
have Russian ships all over
we played
the place.
this. We need the one where he says he'd use force. I'll just say
it happen.
He wouldn't rule. He was asked would he use force. He wouldn't rule out using force to take the Panama Canal and Greenland. That's news. And that the incoming commander.
You're making my point. You're making my point for me. What did he say? He said, I'm not going to provide you with national security or defense information about what I'm going to do globally. I'm the president. I'm not going to tell you anything about that. But 38,000 people died of malaria building the Panama Canal in 1903, and we're spending hundreds of billions of dollars to protect Canada.
John, let me stipulate. I've said before, the only thing harder than running against Donald Trump as a politician is covering him. And I don't say that glibly. I think it's true. Okay? And I completely agree with you that Donald Trump can manipulate us into doing things. I completely agree. And that's a huge challenge because look, Bill Clinton did a version of this too, right? He'd say, don't look over here, look over here, right? But it doesn't answer the question of how the new media, including us, should talk about what Donald Trump said today. It doesn't answer the question. I wasn't
trying to answer the question. I was offering my analysis of what he's doing. And I think what he's doing is meta.
Right.
I don't
But
think
you,
that he
but
came
you
out because
seem
he
to suggest
wanted.
that he was like a puppeteer and he was
Yes,
controlling the reporters, right?
yes.
What should they do
You
to
could
cut the
see it in the
strings?
room, right?
Yes, you
When
could.
you saw when the reporters in the room were cut to, he's like, I'm going to invade Greenland. I'm going to take Panama. We're spending hundreds of billions of dollars to protect Canada. We're not going to do that. I'm going to tariff them. We don't need their cars or their
Right.
lumber. And you
Yeah.
saw people's like the expressions on their
But
faces.
what should they
Train,
be
they're like, do
doing,
you mean
John?
it?
What should
Is
they
this
be
really going to
doing?
happen?
What should they be doing?
What they should be doing is asking about what's actually happening. Like, as they did, as they said, somebody said in the middle of the press conference, hey, Judge Cannon just agreed with
Yeah.
you that Jack Smith's report should not be published.
Yeah.
That's one thing. Judge Burr, talk about the Mershon sentencing, talk about the hostages, talk about Ukraine, as people did. What he does is he then says Canada, and then there's 20 minutes on Canada. You don't have to follow him down that path, in my view.
All right.
Or he can, or he, that's all I'm saying. But I don't care how I'm saying that he is now showing how unequal. You said that the hardest thing to do is cover him, right? As you know, because we texted about this, my view is that this shows that by 2029, the mainstream media, as we understand it, will no longer exist in the way that it exists.
Tell
not
people,
just structurally.
Tell people why you think that based on the press conference.
Because the press corps in that room was extraordinarily unimpressive and incompetent. The coverage of it as it was going on Twitter, on the New York Times, but all this it was as though no one has learned nothing has changed. And he is now he has achieved a level of bulletproofness he did not possess in the first term. They can say anything they want to about him, and he has already established he's already established that he can get the popular vote, he can win the popular vote, he can win again. They came after him with everything. They got nothing. He can ignore them. He can make fun of them. He can say whatever he wants to say. There is no fear. Not that I think he ever had that much fear. And they're just going to run. He's going to be the rabbit on the dog track, and they're just going to run like greyhounds after him, never catching him.
But he's a rabbit. But he's a rabbit as big as Godzilla. Hogan, just to pick up on what John seems to be suggesting, in what ways? Just give us the litany. In what ways is Donald Trump more powerful vis-a-vis the media than he was 8 years ago?
I was looking at the press conference, and in my head, I was thinking to myself, it's like no time has passed in the last 4 years. Like, it's almost like we picked up exactly where he left off. The difference, though, John talked about it. He won in a landslide. He won all the swing states. He won the popular vote. But the media their popularity is between Congress and COVID. It's really low, and it's by their own design. It's their own fault. They lied to us about everything under the Trump administration. Their credibility is shot. And now that Trump has won, there's no Russia collusion, hoax now to start the thing off with. There's no Russian P-tape. There's none of this. So they've been neutered largely. Trump used Twitter in the first administration to go right to the American people, and love it or hate it, you got to know what a sitting president was thinking whenever he thought it. And so the media was, angry that they didn't have to go. He didn't need the filter of Don Lemon or, Martha McCallum or whomever to put something out. He just put it out, and that was him.
Yep.
Now he's coming to this with not just the experience from the first 4 years, the wisdom of the first 4 years, but an understanding of the mechanisms that really have governed D.C. for a long time. And now he has this attitude where he still is kind of on this honeymoon. He's ready to get to work. He wants to do the things he got done. And now it's like he's surrounded himself with people who the first administration told him why he could not do something. Now he has people around him who are telling him how he can do it, which is completely different too.
Yep.
And the media, I think, they're not even a stumbling block. They're not even a bump in the road. He just talks, and whatever they say they're going to say, and to hell with them. And it's fascinating to watch because they really don't have much teeth right now. Now, will they get it back? Maybe, but they don't have it now.
you both brilliant. Like what you just said about where we are is so smart. And I'm gonna see if I can remember the four things I wanted to add, which echo some of what you said, but I couldn't agree with you more. Number one, the resistance is dead. There's embers of it, and there's impulses in that room of where we got to stop Trump. But the organized resistance of we are Hollywood and the universities and the major news organizations and the donors, that is dead, right? So that's a big advantage. Number two, I'm analyzing a man I've known a little bit for 12 years or so. He doesn't care as much about what the New York Times thinks as he did 8 years ago. He doesn't care zero, but the New York Times tried to destroy him. The New York Times tried to send him to prison. So he's not like all dewy-eyed about, well, I really need Maggie to like me. That's a big difference, right? Because that was leverage for the press. Three, their business models are nothing like they were 8 years ago, and they were shit 8 years ago. But they're not standing in that room like we are the dominant media and you need to go through us, right? They're on their back foot. And lastly, and this is not an original point, but it was talked about in the context of the campaign. If he doesn't like what the New York Times is saying, he'll go back on Rogan, right?
Sure.
It's not just Twitter. He's got a million places to go with bigger audiences, by the way,
Way
than
bigger.
the New York Times and NBC News and everybody else. So, and as you said, Hogan, he's 8 years more experienced. He 8 years ago, he was like, well, Hope, what do I do about the fact that the Journal might be writing a negative piece? How are we gonna, whatever? Now it's just like, whatever. Journal can write what they want. I'm not going to prison because of what the Journal writes. John.
I think very important in terms of his power and the impotence of this resistance and the media role in the resistance is what happened today with Meta and Mark Zuckerberg announcing that they were no longer going to have this panel of people. They're not going to have the world of content moderation at Facebook anymore. They were going to use the community notes model that Elon Musk innovated at Twitter. And Zuckerberg, in this statement, very much tweeted out, sent out to the world by his new head of content, Joel Kaplan, former deputy chief of staff to George W. Bush, was the fact-checking hurt the media and hurt us. It was seen to be biased. It was seen as a partisan tool. The media are worse for it. We are worse for it. We're not doing it anymore. If the single most important social media platform on the planet Earth has ceded the ground of we are not going to be the gatekeeper between you and Donald Trump, this irresponsible, reckless, crazy person who somehow mysteriously got himself elected president in a way that we're embarrassed by, would like to see not happen again. He came out the other side of that. He lost the first election. He won, he lost the second election. He won the third. And they are crying uncle and saying not only that they're not going to do it anymore because it's probably bad for their business model and they have regulatory issues and all that, but actually saying this was bad for the media. The role that was adopted, that was taken on, was a mistake. And Bezos said it when he said they weren't going to endorse at the Washington Post, that lost 200,000 subscribers for it. Better that, probably in his view, than having those 200,000 subscribers, because that's not the model anymore. So we're in a different world with him. And also, I think tonally, though he said you'd be stupid if you did that, and this is stupid, and Biden was terrible and all that, the lyrics weren't all that different from 8 years ago, but the music was different. He is a calmer, more commanding. I mean, the idea that he was like unsure of himself, I think he was in many ways, because he was doing things he had never done before and didn't know how to do them really. Not a person who lacks for self-assurance, but now we're just in a different universe. They came at him. You have to, if you're going to go for the king, you have to kill the king. They didn't kill the king. He is stronger than he was before. And as I say, reading as the New York Times was responding in real time during the press conference, I felt this kind of shrinkage of the Times's authority in the face of his new standing as this person with some kind of a mandate he didn't really entirely possess in 2017.
Am I right that the first question of the press conference went to David Sanger of the New York Times?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, David has great authority, and Trump really does respect him, and his questions weren't bad, I didn't think, but even David was overmatched because of the things we just cited. All right, I want to play another clip on another topic, and it's the one John mentioned, which is a continuation of Donald Trump's position that he set down a few weeks ago, I think, saying the hostages need to be released by Election Day. Mm-hmm. At the time, I said it was a brilliant move because if they're not released, he can leverage that. He gave them a warning, and if they are released, he can take credit for it rather than Joe Biden. But play number 2, please.
Before I take office. That all hell must be paid if they don't release the hostages.
Don't you? Well, do I have to define it for you? Look, all hell will break out. If those hostages aren't back, I don't want to hurt your negotiation. If they're not back by the time I get into office, all hell will break out in the Middle East. And it will not be good for Hamas, and it will not be good, frankly, for anyone. All hell will break out. I don't have to say anymore, but that's what it is.
So that gentleman, for those of you who didn't watch the press conference, that's Steve Witkoff, who was watching the press conference, and Donald Trump saw him and called him up on stage. He's the special negotiator for the Middle East and dealing in a not unprecedented, but quite unusual way with the current administration and the parties in the region to try to get the hostages released and to get some sort of settlement. John, you're familiar with what America and Israel's capabilities are. Incredible reporting this morning and commentary in the Wall Street Journal and elsewhere. Iran is so weak now compared to what they were. They're far from on the march. They're on the retreat out of Lebanon, through the weakening of their proxies. What could Donald Trump mean by that? What would that look like in reality?
I think it's fairly obvious what he means, even though he's saying, Hamas is going to get it. What he's saying is that he will greenlight some kind of an operation against Iran and its nuclear sites or its oil production facilities. Those are the 2 targets inside Iran. You also have a target for the Houthis in Yemen, which the Biden administration is also striking, right? I mean, that would be a continuation of Biden policies. The United States hit sites in Yemen, I don't know, 3 or 4 days ago. Yep. But I think when he says all hell will break loose in the Middle East, that is a direct message to Iran. That is 50,000 times more important than talking theoretically about annexing Canada, right? I mean, that is an actual world-changing thing that he is talking about maybe doing if he doesn't get his way by the 20th of January. It's not his way, by the way. We're talking about 100 people who are in tunnels being tortured, including at least 4 Americans who may or may not be dead or alive. And he's saying, you get them out, don't mistake me. And what's important here is he's on record, like, if they're not out by the 20th, he is going to look craven and weak. If all hell doesn't break out in the Middle East. As a result of what he did today, he could have walked back. He could have said, Steve's negotiating. I don't want to. He said that weird thing where he said, I don't want to get in the middle of your negotiations, Steve. But all hell is going to break out if they're not gone. Now, that may be a negotiating tactic, but he's got to put spine behind that if they're not out by the 20th.
It's a red line. It's like Obama in Syria. Like it's clear. Hogan, I think one of the things that people make mistake about Donald Trump, that people call him a warmonger. He's not. He just speaks loudly, but he also believes in carrying a big stick. And so I don't see this as reckless or politically dangerous, as long as, if the hostages aren't released, he's willing to follow through. We've seen him back off things. Do you think he would follow through?
Well, listen, when our trip to North Korea happened, we were in South Korea with President Moon, looking into North Korea from a vantage point. Kamala Harris famously was in the same crow's nest and said, "Have you guys seen the pictures from space? They're really impressive." It was so goofy. President Moon said to Donald Trump on that podium, he said, "Mr. President, we used to have rockets flying over our head all the time. Now there aren't any flying over. We feel so much safer." And Trump looked at the press and said, "Say it to them. They don't even believe it. You got to tell them." Barack Obama told Donald Trump North Korea was going to be the biggest threat. There was going to be a war. It didn't happen. It was the first time, obviously, Russia hadn't tried to gain new territory under Trump. So you're right. He's not a warmonger. He wants to make a deal. He wants to keep peace. Obviously, the Abraham Accords, for heaven's sakes, killed ISIS, settled the region, etc. All the things he did that kind of stabilized not just the region, but the world. I do think, though, he also understands when he did things like taking out Qasem Soleimani, dropping the Moab, etc. He understands the might of our military, what it is capable of. And he will absolutely want those hostages back. And you're right. It's a win-win, because if he gets them back before and he can say he did it, if afterwards he has to get them back, he did it. So either way, he can kind of take credit for it. But regardless, he's very serious about these military issues. Having sat with him in the Situation Room many times, he asks some probing, serious questions about how this stuff goes. So I wouldn't get ahead of him. And yes, it's a negotiating tactic, because he will never tell you what he wants to do ultimately. Because as you remember, it was Vladimir Putin. He said, Trump was talking about Vladimir Putin, and when he told him he would knock the hell out of him, he said, Putin probably didn't believe me, but he believed me about 10%. And that's all I needed to prevent them from encroaching on another region. So I think if Hamas is listening, which I know they are, they also believe it, but I bet they believe it a whole lot more than 10% based on what he did through the first term. So It's a meandering way to answer your question to show kind of what he did in the past, but I absolutely think he would approve some type of action against Iran. How that looks, what shape that takes, we don't know, but I will say this. Remember, what the incoming administration is trying to do with his cabinet picks is move very quickly. Next week, he's trying to get some of the hearings to start on the national security pieces he wants to put in place. That's not a coincidence. He's talking about Iran in that way.
I want to say quickly, just follow up on this. Would not be warmongering for us to hit Iran's sites.
Yes.
Because Israel and the United States took out Iran's defenses. Yes. This is a unique moment in world history in which a real existential threat in the form of a potential nuclear program on the one hand, and an enemy of the United States who is responsible for the proxy group holding Americans under torture in tunnels, we have a free shot at. It is not warmongering. They don't have much of a capacity to come at us in response. It's a free shot. And I think Biden is insane not to take it, to be honest. I've said that in the pages of commentary on our podcast. It is that this is what the strategic events of the last 3 months have led us open to. And I think probably the hostages are going to come out, because why would Iran take the risk? Iran controls Hamas. Why would Iran take the risk? There's nothing in it for them not to surrender in this one regard.
There hasn't been a moment like this for an American president since, the Shah was in power. I mean, the opportunity to hit them without fear of serious reprisal is
every enemy that we
impressive.
have. Right? We heard last, couple of weeks that we've been hearing from Jake Sullivan and Tony Blinken and all this, how scared the Biden administration was of Russia using a tactical nuclear weapon in Ukraine. And that's one of the things that held them back from really committing to helping Ukraine and all of that. So everywhere we turn, when we think about the challenges of the United States, we have to say, what is the risk-reward ratio, right? The risk-reward ratio, if we engage with North Korea, they're very irresponsible and they can just nail Seoul. China, same thing, the island, Taiwan, whatever, if such a thing should happen. I don't know when in modern history there has been an antagonist that we are currently fighting whose proxy is interfering with the shipping in the Red Sea and in the Indian Ocean, that is defenseless against us.
Yeah.
So, like I say, I'm not sure it's even warmongering if he were to make a move.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, there's other clips I could play. We haven't talked about January 6th, which is getting a lot of attention as it always is, and Jack Smith in Ukraine. But I want to start bringing folks in. So again, if you'd like to be part of the conversation, please raise your hand. I'll bring you in. You'll tell us where you are and what is on your mind. Thanks again to Hogan and John. Brilliant conversation. Mark, welcome in. Thank you for joining. Happy New Year. Tell folks who don't know where you are, what's on your mind.
Thanks very much. My name's Mark. I live outside of the DC Metroplex in Maryland. Supported Trump in 2020 and again in 2024. Just an interesting reflection. My first political memory was Ronald Reagan's inauguration and the release of the Iranian hostages about 7 minutes thereafter. I do wonder if Trump is taking a page from that playbook to establish a tone for his second term.
Yes.
Yes.
Simple answer. Yes. He knows the history of it. He understands the impact of it. And if he can be a part in getting those people back, he'll do it. And if he can mimic or copy to some degree what Reagan had to do, then that's what he's going to do. So yes.
If he gets American hostages, that I'm not sure they'll be given gift memberships to Mar-a-Lago, but they'll get some good stuff. Yeah, John.
Yeah, no, I think absolutely he is literally thinking about exactly that.
Sure.
And he should. Yep. And so should Biden. So should Biden.
Yeah, so should Biden. That's the real question. Why isn't Biden doing it? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he has every reason to be scared. I mean, look, Trump took out Soleimani. He's got every reason to be afraid of Trump.
Yep.
Got every reason. The Iranians have every reason to be afraid of Israel. Biden has given them very little reason to be afraid of his aggressive intentions. Right. Trump being as aggressive as he was today is going to be very helpful to Steve Witkoff when he gets off that plane. Yep. I mean,
Israel
go to the table, sitting there, whoever it is across the table. They're not telling us who are the negotiating factors in the negotiation. He's coming off that plane and saying, the clock is ticking on you. The clock is ticking, and he means it. I know this guy, and he means it. Like, that is, again, if Biden wants to end his presidency at a high note, hostages will come out. That's why I think Witkoff is welcome. I mean, I think that the Biden negotiators are happy to have the Trump person there to bolster the case.
Yeah, because he can talk like a madman, unhinged madman. Yeah, the way Biden can't. Yeah. It's a good cop, bad cop thing. Mark, thank you for the great question. Thank you for joining. Appreciate it. All right. Haley, Happy New Year. Haley's a valued member of the two-way community. We haven't heard from you in a bit. Haley, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are and what's on your mind, please.
Happy New Year, guys. John, I love you. I've been following you forever. I'm also your resident Israeli Jew from Texas, so thanks for the topic. It's a big one on my mind. Basically, it's just like I hear everything from all the Israeli news. I do tune in every day because I hope, we'll get that every day I wake up in the morning. I put it on because maybe there'll be a deal. But basically what I hear from the Israeli side is that Hamas is doing everything in its power basically to not agree to any type of deal. I think the most recent attempt is for a part deal of about 34 hostages. And I know that they were leaked, like the names of, it's a whole mess in Israel, but they're doing everything in their power to not come to the table. And while I do have hope that Trump will bring something different in negotiation tactics or whatever he's doing, because I think he's going about it the right way, with full strength, not how Biden has been handling it, but they're doing everything in their power to not come to the table. So are we thinking that this is going to be like Reagan and Iran, where it's like the night of inauguration, we'll have this spectacular breakthrough that they just decide to agree to everything that Israel is putting forward, because Israel's been at the same point forever in what they are asking for. And it just seems like there's nobody who's doing any negotiation on the other side.
Just very quickly, I think the strategy here is for Iran to make Hamas give up the hostages. Now, there may be some form of negotiation of safe passage for some of Hamasniks somewhere, so that Israel agrees not to kill them the way they could kill anybody at any time once they're above ground, or something like that, whether that agreement is adhered to over time, rather than, say, following the Munich model of hunting people down afterwards, which is which is what Israel did in 1972, 3, 4. I don't know, but I think if I'm following this correctly, it's not clear who Hamas is, but Hamas is an Iranian proxy. Therefore, Iran presumably can be the party that says to them, "It's over. Let them out. We'll figure out how to get you out. This is all done because we need to clear the decks."
Like Dandy Don Meredith. Turn out the lights.
Turn out the lights. The party's
over.
That's a good 70s reference right there.
Haley and Hogan are too young to get that reference, but you can.
Anyway, I just think that's Haley is from Texas, so Dandy Don.
Well, I'm from New York originally. I live here now.
But in Texas, Dandy Don, I assume Dandy Don is still a figure in Texas in some fashion. Should be.
Hogan, you ever heard of Don Meredith?
I have, because my dad lived in Texas for a while, and I lived in Texas for a few years, and yes, I know the reference.
Okay.
Sure.
Haley, thank you for the question.
Always.
Appreciate having you on.
Thanks,
love you guys.
Thank you so much. All right.
Hey, can I say just real quick?
Yes, sir.
I was out somewhere in DC, and I know John gets his whole career because he's a celebrity, as are you, Mark. Someone came up to me and didn't say, "Hey, great job in the Trump administration, great job on Newsmax, great job on Fox." They came up and said, "Hey, I love you on two-way." How about that?
Not a surprise. Not a surprise. It happened.
No, and that wasn't about me. That was about two-way. The guy was watching two-way.
It's about the Hogan persona that exists on two-way, which is authentic, accessible. You know,
I got roasted when I didn't come on last week. Twitter started blowing me up because I couldn't make it the last minute.
To be here. No, I mean, I love our platform because people just feel a connection to it that they don't necessarily. You know, same with your former colleague Sean Spicer. People say him all the time, like, who I didn't know the Sean Spicer I now know. Edgar, speaking of not knowing people before, Edgar, welcome in. Thank you for joining. Happy New Year. Tell folks who don't know where you are and tell us what's on your mind, please, sir.
Wow, that is incredible. I actually got a question, and I did not anticipate that. I typically listen on YouTube. Yes, I'm Edgar, 29 years old. I'm from New York City, originally from Connecticut. 3-time Trump voter.
Edgar, you have a fantastic voice.
Thank you.
I'm sure you've been told that.
Typically, no, actually.
Really?
Sometimes it's a little too loud.
Maybe you just got good AV equipment, but you sound fantastic.
You know, I'm still at work. I'm trying to wrap up now.
Okay. Well, go ahead, ask away. So you live in New York City now?
Yeah. Yep. I'm sorry I couldn't make the comedy club event, but
there'll be more. Don't worry.
I've been listening to the platform since you had that really interesting comment about you know, after the election, people kind of having tough times tolerating the results of it. And phenomenal show, by the way. So, and Megyn Kelly, you guys have just done such a great job. Like having Hogan here, this other gentleman who was speaking for the most of the time. I hear him all the time on the news, but he's great. So you guys are just doing so well.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So quick question. And you know, I was a little bit late today. You know, there's always, when an administration is changing hands, you know, some last minute executive orders that get done and all that. And one of the things that I found, you know, interesting was this negotiation that concluded in early December. I think it was with Medicare, maybe HHS or something, where a lot of those employees were allowed to work from home for the next, you know, 2 years or so. And I'm just curious, Is that something that can change? JP Morgan today announced that, they're doing 5 days a week. I work at a bank. We've been 5 days a week in the office since 2022. I think culturally, maybe I'm a little bit bitter. I graduated college 2017, know what it's like to actually work 5 days a week. And then, these new crop of
It's normal.
graduates,
It's
normal.
Edgar.
And it's
what
a
people
privilege to work from home, right? We were
It's
just having this conversation with
privilege to work from home or to work in the office.
To work from home. I mean, you have to be a good worker in the office, and then if your boss wants to give you the handout to leave Thursday to that 3-day break and you work Friday, that's a great privilege and good for retention. Support it fully. But I'm curious because we deal with the Securities and Exchange Commission all the time, and I have noticed and again, this may be anecdotal, right? Plenty of other bankers in the world. Everything takes so much longer with the federal government, and specifically with the Security and Exchange Commission. They're forced to be in the office 1 day a month. Like if you go to the SEC building in DC, there is nobody there. And I know that's the case. There's plenty of reports, 5% occupancy, et cetera.
Yes, sir.
So I'm just curious with some of those agreements, and I don't know if there's going to be any more, but I know that, the December deal I was talking about was a lot of employees. Do you think that's something that can be reversed, something that can be changed? I know it's very picky of an issue,
but I'm
just curious about it. Because I think culturally it's really good for us to be in the office.
Yeah,
that's
there's almost nothing that the Biden administration can do that can't be undone. And the lawyers try to do clever things to,
right.
I'm going to go back to a 1980s reference in sports. It was the dawn of free agency in the NBA. Okay. And if you had a player who wanted to be a free agent and you made him an offer, the existing team, the current team, could keep the player if they matched the offer. Right. So Mitch Kupchak was on my team, the Washington Bullets, and the Lakers wanted to sign Mitch Kupchak, and so they gave him an offer and they said, "We guarantee you we'll give you a house worth more than $1 million. That's a 20-minute drive to the Pacific Ocean." Right. And a 20-minute drive to the arena, right?
Right.
So the Bullets couldn't match that.
Right.
Right. So the lawyers try to come up with stuff like that. They try to come up with stuff that can't be undone because they say, this is guaranteed, whatever. But there are very few examples of, as far as I know, of things that can't be undone. And the Trump lawyers are sitting there every day saying, all right, here's what they did. Here's how we're going to undo it. So I think those folks will be in the office 5 days a week. John.
The first thing that Bill Clinton did when he became president in 1992, this is on the last page of my first book, Hell of a Ride, is that he voided all of George H.W. Bush's executive orders in one fell swoop and started the administration anew, meaning he said they're all null and void, and then they would backfill and then reinstate the ones that he wanted. There would be hundreds that they wanted. But the idea was everything done before me that was done by executive order, meaning not by legislation, but with the force of law in the executive branch, is now null and void. I assume that the Trump administration will do that legally. It's kind of the easiest way to clear the decks. And then, as I say, go back and fill and just put them, re-sign them. Hogan, am I right about that?
Yeah. Not only are you right, these things have been written now and legally tested, pressure tested for the last several years. They're written, and there are anywhere, depending on which ones are actually completed, 100 to 500 of these things kind of floating around, many of which are already done. And there are multiple versions. So if they get enjoined in court, they can just drop another one. Okay, they're ready. That's number one. Number two, as far as people coming back to work, you'll remember Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy said this was one of the things they wanted to do to actually shrink government, was force people to come back to work,
right,
and work from their offices. Because I mean, the real estate here in DC, I was talking to somebody about, he was buying a building, and he said the building was like $93 million, and it's on sale for like 30 because there's no one in it. There's no occupancy in any of these buildings. But anyway, Elon and Vivek said that's one of the things they wanted to do, because what they thought would happen, and they're probably right, is a lot of people who are used to working at home are going to go, no, I'm good.
I'm out.
I'm not going to do it anymore, right? So who knows what that does to real estate in DC or apartments in, you don't know, but that's absolutely something the administration is looking to do.
Mark, I hadn't been in DC. I've been very, very little in DC in the last couple of years, for family reasons or whatever. And I just happened to be there last month, and I was walking around downtown, and I've never seen anything like it. Like downtown DC on a Thursday afternoon looks like DC looked when I lived there on a Sunday morning at 8 a.m. And I'm talking about
Easter
around
Sunday.
Person Square,
Yeah.
around Farragut Square, in the places where people work. It is bizarre, and
Yep.
it's wrong. It doesn't feel right.
And it's the same in the private sector too. Edgar, I appreciate you saying that, it's a privilege to be in the office, but it's a privilege to be able to work at home on Fridays. I'm so hardcore about this. 5 days a week in the office, full time.
Oh yeah.
It is essential, not just for accountability and collegiality, but for order to a workplace. So I'm stunned at because I've seen the same thing John has in DC. It's shocking to me. It's shocking to me. Edgar, thank you. All right,
Yeah,
I want to say
thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.
Come back regularly, please. I want to say something about the platform because as you know, I don't like to read the chat, but occasionally it catches my eye. Breaks my heart that more Democrats aren't talking. Raise your hand, Democrats. This platform is for everybody. Now, you should delight, if you're a Democrat, in listening to John and Hogan, because this platform is about learning. And so when people say, well, they're just Republicans talking, if you're a Democrat, great. It's not what we want, but it's such a great opportunity to learn, because Hogan and John are sharing their knowledge. These are long, sophisticated conversations. That's what two-way is about. Opportunity to ask some questions. But we've not taken the measures we may have to take if we don't get more Democrats raising their hands. There are things we could do to get more Democrats raising their hands, but we prefer to just happen organically. And there's no reason. I see Democrats on here because I know a lot of the people on here. I see you. You're just choosing not to raise your hands, but you are welcome here. You are more than welcome to be part of it.
Pro tip.
Yes,
Tell
sir.
them if the Democrats don't raise their hands, they'll be held to pay.
They'll
See,
be
it works
held to pay.
it works across all.
They'll be held to pay, and I'm not going to tell you what that means. I'm not going to tell you what that means, but it does involve having to eat a meal Hogan cooked, whatever it takes. But what I don't like to see is I don't see Democrats in the chat saying, "Well, we can't talk. We're not welcome here," or whatever. Like, of course you're welcome here. It's the whole point of the platform. And if you're a Democrat, the opportunity to talk to John and Hogan and other Republicans we have on is not available to you anywhere else. So please take advantage of it. Love to have your participation here. And we will, and we have Democrats on all the time, but there are nights, and sometimes I call on people I know Bruce is a Trump supporter, but I don't know who everybody supports. I just call on people. The gentleman, Mr. Ortiz, who was just on it, I don't think he's been on before. He said he hadn't. Edgar, I didn't know he was a Trump supporter, just called on him. That's what we do. And we hope that in the end there's a nice mix, but if there's not, the only person you have to blame, Democrats, is yourself. Please raise your hands. All right.
I think there's meaning here and it gets to a little bit what I was talking about, which is when you have Trump behaving like, standing astride the petty world like a colossus, as Cassius says in Julius Caesar, it has this debilitating effect on his opposition. That was not true in late 2016 or 2017 when people were getting ready to go do the Women's March.
Yes.
And
although the ratings went down on MSNBC and CNN for a bit, but then they came back very robustly.
Right, but it seems to me that one of the ways of getting back in the game, if you are somebody who is disheartened by Trump, is to get your arguments together and to actually
get him out there,
get in the arena, because he will run circles around. He and people like us might run circles around you, but we might not also.
I got a long email on one of the topics we covered about from a journalist, a pretty prominent journalist who is watching, and I urged him to come on and he had a 10-paragraph critique of what we said about the media and Trump, who disagreed with us, particularly you, John, vociferously. And I urged him to come on. I haven't heard back from him. But, if you disagree and you're watching, come on. Now, if you're on YouTube, you got to be smart enough to figure out how to come on the platform. But all right, Lewis, welcome in. Happy New Year. What's on your mind, sir? Oh, Lewis's mic is not working. Lewis, you're unmuted, but we can't hear you. See if you can figure it out real quick.
We gotta figure it out. He's got a Wookiee behind him.
I know.
It's very key.
Is that
Wookiee in
3D?
four
Is that
degrees.
3D or 2D?
4 degrees and a Wookiee. That's very impressive.
4 degrees. Yeah, those are all degrees. I can see that.
Yeah.
Lewis, none of those degrees are in audio visual. No. All right,
Walked into
Lewis.
that one.
All right, Lewis. Sorry. Come back tomorrow. It's 2D. All right, Lewis. Sorry about that. Come back tomorrow. Figure it out. Check with a teenager you know, somebody with tech expertise. All right, gentlemen. I want you to tell me this. Tomorrow is a pretty slow news day, as best I could tell. Tomorrow on the morning shows, what John Podhoretz, the traditionalist, would say, Good Morning America, the Today Show, those types of shows. Will they lead with the Trump press conference? And of the 17 things he talked about they could lead with, what will they lead with? John.
I think they're going to lead with the Pacific Palisades burning down, is my guess. But if there's a political story, that will follow that.
If they do something on the press conference, what will it be?
I think it will be Greenland and Panama, and that will be a mistake. That should be the hostages. But
yes, and it's not just what they cover; it's how they cover it. So instead of saying Greenland, look at what he said, and let's talk about the history of presidents discussing the acquisition of Greenland and why that would be important militarily. They'll do it in a mocking way and make it sound stupid, like politics just started under Donald Trump, and then then we're back to where we were.
Well, I've not seen much of this, but but I'm curious, and I started making calls on it today. I didn't reach anybody, but it seems to me, just from looking at a map, unambiguously true that it would be in America's national security interest to have a larger presence in Greenland. I mean, it's like I said this morning, it's like Guam or Okinawa. It's just if you want to check Russia and China, man, that's a good piece of real estate to have.
Yep.
And I'm still curious of how we got our base there. We're still going to look into that. All right, John and Hogan, thank you both so much. Very grateful. Love having you on. Hope you'll be regulars here. And Hogan, remember, the only real recognition you get that's warm is from your appearances on Two Way.
Very true.
All right, thank you both. Have a good night. Thank you all for watching. Tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern Time, a very special program. It's called The Morning Meeting. Sean, Dan, and I will probably still be talking about the press conference because I'm curious what they think. But there'll be some other developments overnight for sure that we can talk about. And just looking at my inbox here, there's some interesting stuff coming on. There was a John Fetterman interview on Fox that aired while this program was on that people seem very keen on. So we'll probably show some of that. Sean and Dan love talking about John Fetterman. Not sure exactly why, but they do. And I do too. Here we go. No, all right. I thought we were going to have a surprise last minute thing. We don't. Thank you for watching. Again, we'll see you tomorrow. It's 9 a.m. And then again, this program's on 6 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. Because, Hogan, if it's 6 p.m. Eastern Time, what time is it? It's 2-way. Thank you both. Good night, everybody.
Thanks, guys.